Good evening, you're watching Sky News live at 5. Police hunting for the killer of schoolgirl Milly Dowler believe they've made a major breakthrough in their investigation.
Milly disappeared 3 years ago this month. Her body was found 6 months later.
Well, now officers investigating her murder are expected to release new CCTV footage of a red car spotted yards from where she was last seen alive. Well, Sky's Barbara Serra is in Walton-on-Thames where Milly was last seen alive. And Barbara, there's been a very big gap since we last heard anything about this case. What more can you tell us?
Well, absolutely. It's been 3 years, almost to the day, since Milly Dowler disappeared. But now police are hailing what they're calling a possible breakthrough. What they're expected to do tomorrow is release CCTV footage of a car, a red Daewoo Nexia, an N-Reg, which they have on CCTV footage, which has been enhanced by the FBI. Now, this car was seen parked and driving away from one of the tiny streets just off here, Station Avenue here near Walton-on-Thames Station, and police believe that it might have something to do with the disappearance of Milly Dowler. Now, police are very keen to obviously trace the car or speak to anyone who might have been involved with it. There are fears, though, that the car might have been scrapped, but even so, police are keen to speak to anyone regarding this car, hopefully find the car. They're keen to run forensic tests on it if the car is still in existence, so that they can either follow the lead or rule it out.
And Barbara, it has been a very high-profile case, of course, not least because of Milly's parents getting involved with a long campaign about it.
Absolutely. Milly's parents started Milly's Fund to make teenagers more aware of the dangers and their personal safety. Also, it's been an incredibly high-profile investigation from Surrey Police. They've invested a lot of time, a lot of money. They've even put a £50,000 reward for anyone who might have information which would lead to the killer. But so far, and remember, we're coming up to the three-year anniversary of Milly Dowler's abduction, the 21st of March, so that's Monday. So 3 years on, still nothing concrete, and a lot of high-profile suspects have been questioned, including Ian Huntley, the Soham murderer. He was questioned but then eventually ruled out as a suspect. So in spite of all of that, no concrete leads, but police here are quite confident that tomorrow's release of the CCTV footage might eventually lead to something more concrete.
Thank you, Barbara.
Still to come here on Live at 5, raise their age. MPs call over new army recruits after deep cut.
Under fire, dramatic pictures of Russia's border police in action.
And in sport, Manchester United draw Newcastle in the FA Cup semi-finals. Arsenal will play Blackburn.
It's been called Britain's new gun capital. Now the spiralling murder rate in Nottingham has caught the government in the crossfire.
The local police chief says his officers are overstretched and that paperwork is preventing them catching criminals.
And that's been seized on by the opposition. Sky's John Craig has more.
They call it Assassination City. 30 murders under investigation. Violent crime double the national average. And you're 4 times as likely to be burgled. Welcome to Nottingham. Green's claim that his officers can't cope was seized on by the Conservatives. They blame government targets and bureaucracy.
The police now spend as much time behind their desks filling in forms as they do on our streets. We're never going to tackle crime and disorder if we don't trust policemen and women to exercise their common sense and their judgment.
But the government says police are out tackling crime and insists that red tape is being cut.
There will always be some paperwork to be done. I think police officers, you know, across the decades will tell you that. And we are trying to get that down, abolishing forms, using technology, getting them out on the streets to do that. But again, targets, we've actually got crime down by 30% in this country. And that's not all due to central initiatives. A lot of it's due to initiatives by the forces themselves as well.
But Home Office ministers have promised MPs there'll be emergency help for Nottinghamshire Police to cope with its spate of murder inquiries. In Assassination City, it's a raging drugs turf war that's fueling the rocketing of the murder rate. John Craig, Sky News.
Sky's Derek Tedder joins us now live from Nottingham, and Sky's political editor Adam Bolton is in Westminster. Derek, let's start with you. Is Nottingham really in as much trouble as the Chief Constable has suggested?
Well, if I tell you that I'm standing at the site of Nottingham's latest murder, if I just step to the side, 34-year-old Paul Thomas was gunned down just here outside this pub last week. It's the latest murder. Nottingham, as you heard in that report, Nottinghamshire police are having to deal with around about 30 murders at the moment. There have been 13 murders since January. Now, the Chief Constable, Steve Green, we've been trying to contact him all day to try and speak to him about these claims that he's made. He's keeping his head down all day today. Somebody who's not keeping their head down is the local MP, Graham Allen. He's furious. He's saying that the comments that the Chief Constable made were demoralising to indeed his officers. But if the Chief Constable is right, then it beggars the question, why is it that this force in Nottinghamshire is so underfunded? Well, a short time ago, we spoke to the Police Federation here in the city. He believes that Nottingham and Nottinghamshire should be regarded as special cases. This is what he said.
Of course, outside of the Metropolitan Police, the Category A murders, we are second in the country to that. And so I think it's quite right that they should look at the unique needs of Nottinghamshire without using any of the comparators, the unique needs of Nottinghamshire, and saying, yes, Nottinghamshire deserve to be classed as a metropolitan force and given that metropolitan level of funding.
Well, the question tonight has been asked, does the Chief Constable regret what he said? We can't speak to him until we actually do manage to sit him down and ask him. Well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Let's have a word with Adam Bolton in Westminster. On the face of it, Adam, this Chief Constable seems to be handing the opposition parties a bit of an election stick to thump the government with.
Yes, and that's why I think the local Labour MP is saying that in some way the newspaper which broke the story may have put the Chief Constable under duress. The newspaper, of course, denies that absolutely. But for the Tories, the big point about this is the general picture that the statistics which the government comes up with about extra money and about extra achievements don't necessarily reflect a sense of improvement on the ground. In particular, all day they've been banging away at this question of police paperwork, something they'd already highlighted, saying that if elected, the Conservatives would cut it. And they're also talking again about the target culture, the fact that sometimes when the government sets targets to make public services accountable, in the process it distorts the service which those public servants are trying to deliver, and not always in a beneficial way. So there's no doubt about it, we have not heard the last of this matter of police time and police availability, whatever happens in Nottingham itself.
Adam Bolton in Westminster, Derek Tedder in Nottingham. Thank you both for now. So, are police officers spending more time at their desks than on the beat? Well, a typical shift lasts 9 hours, and on average officers will be stuck at the station for 4 of those. We'll take a closer look at those figures behind the row over policing at about 5:30 this afternoon.
Now, shocking and catastrophic. That's how a damning report today described the failings of military commanders at Deep Cut and other army training camps. The Defence Select Committee said radical changes were needed.
It recommended the Army considers raising the minimum recruiting age up to 18.
And that an independent military complaints commission is set up to deal with bullying allegations.
But the committee didn't support the idea of an independent inquiry into those Deep Cut deaths.
Okay, the first target that we've got here then, all right, is a figure 11, which is mounted on a witness screen.
Most of these young recruits aren't old enough to drink alcohol or vote, yet they're being trained in the use of deadly weapons. It's a high-pressure time for these teenagers. They've enough to cope with without having to worry about bullying. Yet MPs on the Defence Select Committee say bullying remains an issue. In fact, it's underreported. They're calling for a change in culture where intimidation is no longer tolerated and an independent body to oversee bullying complaints.
If you have a more open culture, then people who are being bullied or have complaints will feel less intimidation by going outside the chain of command.
The MP's report was prompted by a string of tragedies at the Deep Cut Army training camp in Surrey. What exactly happened within the barbed wire fences at Deep Cut Barracks that resulted in the deaths of 4 young recruits? Their parents blame a culture of bullying and intimidation, but 10 years on from the first death, there are still no firm answers. Private Jeff Gray was just 17 when he died of 2 gunshot wounds to the head. His parents say today's report backs their claims that senior officers failed in their duty of care towards their son and other recruits.
I think it just strengthens our case once again for a public inquiry. If the system failed Jeff, we need to know why the system failed Jeff, and we need to fix that system.
Concerned that the very young struggle to cope with the rigours of military life, the Select Committee is calling on the MOD to look at the implications of raising the entry age from 16 to 18. Like Private Jeff Gray, 3 of the 4 recruits who died at Deep Cut were just 17. Mark White, Sky News.
A man in his 60s has died after being partially beheaded in an horrific attack in North London. It's believed the victim was attacked with an axe in the Swiss Cottage area. A 30-year-old man was arrested at the scene. 1 million people are thought to have crammed into the streets of Beirut today to protest against the continuing presence of Syrian forces in Lebanon. The protest easily dwarfed the pro-Syrian rally of some 500,000 held last week by the Shia Muslim group Hezbollah. Police have named the family swept into the sea at Scarborough yesterday. Kim Barrett and her 11-year-old son Luke Greenwood were plucked from the water but later pronounced dead. The woman's 13-year-old daughter Amy is still missing. Well, Sky's Gerard Tubb is in Scarborough at the scene of the tragedy. And Gerard, we know that the waters at this time of the year are freezing. Has the search yet been called off?
It has. We've been following this search all day today. More than 60 people from the fire and rescue, from the police, being coordinated by the Coast Guard, have been combing this beach, the whole of the North Bay and Scarborough. There have been helicopters up looking in the rocks, but really they knew that there was very little chance of finding Amy Greenwood. They knew last night that she could not possibly have survived. The water was 5 degrees when she was swept into it yesterday. They've called the search off, and the police say, to be honest, there's little chance really of them searching in any meaningful way tomorrow, because by now the body could be anywhere. Very high seas expected again tonight. The water will be up to where I'm standing by 7 or 8 o'clock tonight, as it was yesterday. So the search really has now been called off, and the father of Amy Greenwood and little Luke, who died, was brought to the spot where they were swept away today, and he's now having to face up to the fact that his daughter's body may never be found.
Gerard, thanks.
Now, these are tough times for the Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams. He's in the United States for his traditional St Patrick's Day tour, but the celebrations have been dogged by controversy. Usually a great supporter of the party, the leading Irish-American politician Ted Kennedy has cancelled their meeting because of ongoing IRA activity. The New York Republican Senator Peter King is another Sinn Féin supporter, but he's recently called on the IRA to disband, and Mr Adams won't be meeting the president either. Instead, Mr Bush is playing host to the McCartney sisters, who of course have accused the IRA of covering up their brother's murder. Well, the snub comes just a week after the IRA offered to shoot those responsible for Robert McCartney's death. He was stabbed in a pub brawl in January. That killing and the IRA's alleged involvement in a multi-million-pound bank raid have left Sinn Féin in a political wilderness. Sky's David Crabtree sent this report from New York.
Can Sinn Féin remain viable?
Gerry Adams was on the defensive as he spoke to some of the richest and most influential business leaders in New York. He's been under intense scrutiny over Sinn Féin's involvement with the IRA following the Northern Bank robbery and the brutal murder of Robert McCartney outside a Belfast pub.
Sinn Féin does want to bring about an end to the IRA. 2, Sinn Féin, I think, with others, will be successful in achieving that. And then 3, for Irish Republicans, the alternative to the IRA has to be Sinn Féin.
Support may be wavering in the US. Gerry Adams has not had his traditional St Patrick's Day invitation to the White House, and under visa restrictions, Sinn Féin is not allowed to fundraise.
Without question, they are losing support here in the States and, in fact, on the island as well.
The lack of invitations to the White House and by other political leaders here in the States reflects a sense of disappointment.
St Patrick's celebrations have been underway across the United States at this most uncomfortable time for Gerry Adams and Sinn Féin. Tomorrow the spotlight will turn on Robert McCartney's 5 sisters, who will arrive in the US to take their campaign for justice to the White House, leaving Gerry Adams to continue on a tour of damage limitation.
Jerry Adams does not want to become Yasser Arafat. He does not want to become someone who's unwilling to choose, in Mr. Arafat's case, between the olive branch and the gun.
Jerry Adams said it was a defining time for Sinn Féin. He admitted they were in the eye of a storm. But he said it wasn't Sinn Féin or the IRA who killed Robert McCartney. David Crabtree, Sky News, New York.
To Washington now, and Sky's David Blevins. And David, it does appear that America's red carpet is being laid out for the McCartney sisters rather than Sinn Féin.
That is indeed the case. To be frozen out by President Bush is one thing for Jerry Adams, but to have his request for a meeting with Senator Ted Kennedy turned down is quite something else altogether. The very fact that both President Bush and Senator Kennedy have chosen to meet with the McCartney sisters instead is extraordinary. 6 weeks ago, they were like any other family in Northern Ireland. Later this week, they will raise their case for justice at the highest possible level, but they say they wouldn't be in Washington unless they had to be.
We are concerned with getting justice for Robert, and we have discussed various ways in which we could do that. And to be honest with you, we never imagined for a minute this campaign was going to be going on as long as it has been. We said at the start we were going to the White House, but we didn't seriously think we would have to go to the White House considering the circumstances. So it is something that we will look at, but it may not be the best way to achieve justice, which is our ultimate goal. But it's something that I will consider. But at this point in time, I'm not saying for definite that I will or won't.
Just sticking with politics for a second, David, it does look as though Sinn Féin is running out of friends over there.
I think it does indeed look like Sinn Féin is having doors slammed in its face all over the place. Jerry Adams is, of course, still engaged in a speaking tour, talking to many Irish Republicans, and as David Crabtree explained there, engaging in something of a damage limitation exercise. But for the vast majority of Irish Americans, they will perhaps this week, for the very first time, begin to ask questions about the IRA as they hear the McCartney sisters tell their story. And that's what Jerry Adams is up against. The McCartney sisters will be competing for the headlines.
David, thanks for now.
You're watching Live at 5. These are our top stories this afternoon. Detectives are thought to be closing in on the killer of schoolgirl Milly Dowler after a major breakthrough in the investigation. The crucial development centres around a red car which was seen yards from where Milly was last seen in Walton-on-Thames.
The Home Office has insisted bureaucracy in the police force is being reduced after a police chief said his officers were struggling to cope. Nottinghamshire Chief Constable Steve Green said they were overburdened with paperwork.
And the Army has been accused of failing in the way it handles new recruits. An MP's report, sparked by 4 deaths at the Deep Cut Barracks, recommended raising the minimum age for joining up to 18.
See how the markets have behaved this Monday. The FTSE closed down 7. Not starting the week very positively, closing at 4975. Dow Jones at the moment, though, up almost 20 at 10,794. The Nasdaq up almost 3 at 2,044.
The weather for tomorrow: rain will move northeastwards across the UK. It will be much milder than of late, with temperatures rising in a moderate southwesterly wind. Michael Jackson's young accuser has begun what promises to be a gruelling day in court.
Yes, the 15-year-old is being cross-examined by the pop star's lawyers.
In a heated exchange, defence lawyer Thomas Mesereau Jr., Sky's Jane Secker, is outside the courtroom in Santa Maria. Jane, first of all, the arrival of Michael Jackson this morning. We're hearing he was subdued. Is that how you saw him as well?
Yes, well, he certainly didn't come in his pyjamas, that's for sure. But he did walk slightly slower than he has done previous to Thursday, when, of course, he had this late, dramatic entrance and said it was because of a bad back. He walked slightly more haltingly than he normally does, but had time to wave to his fans. Now, inside the court, we've been hearing about 45 minutes worth of questioning so far of Gavin Arvizo. Now, he's the crucial witness in this case. He was 13 at the time that he says Michael Jackson abused him. And we've just had some startling new evidence come through. And this is just something that's come out this weekend, apparently. Now, you'll remember that Thomas Mesereau has alleged that Gavin Arvizo has made up this story, that he's changed his story a number of times. What's now come to light and been brought to the court's attention is a conversation he had with Dean Alpert. He was a teacher at the John Burroughs school that he attended. attended. Mesereau said to Gavin, at some time during this conversation you had with Dean Alpert, he looked you in the eye and said, are these allegations that Michael Jackson abused you true? And Gavin replied, yes. And Mesereau said, and you said they were not true, right? And Gavin said, I told him that Michael didn't do anything to me. So this Dean's evidence apparently saying that he asked Gavin twice, and on one occasion Gavin shook his head, and on a second occasion he gave him this quote. So this is quite significant that the boy at the centre of this has apparently told another person that Michael Jackson didn't abuse him, that these allegations were false.
We heard last week, Jane, that Gavin Arvizo seemed very nervous. How is his demeanour today in court?
Well, he's slightly more confident than perhaps he was at the very end of Thursday's evidence. He only had 20 minutes of cross-examination from Thomas Mesereau. Thomas Mesereau was really quite fierce with him in that time. Now, he's been very gentle with the older sister and the younger brother of Gavin, and people thought perhaps that Thomas Mesereau would have taken the same path with Gavin Arvizo, but that wasn't the case on Thursday. I think he's setting out straight away to discredit him in the eyes of the jury, because, of course, it's his testimony that is the important one for the jurors to believe or discredit.
Thank you, Jane.
Now, I beg your pardon?
We're using actors to recreate the vital moments of the Michael Jackson trial throughout our coverage here on Sky News. You can see a special half-hour programme featuring the day's evidence at 9:30 and 2:30 every Tuesday to Saturday, and that's repeated throughout the day on Sky News Active.
Just to fill you in on this breaking news, you can see at the bottom of your screen there, government policy advisors, Crown prosecutors and other top civil servants have voted to strike in a row over pensions. This is following on from a vote last week that strike likely to happen just a couple of weeks before the election. That's coming from the FDA union tonight. We'll keep an eye on it and bring you more when it arrives.
Indeed, let's look at the sport now with Jackie.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you. Manchester United and Arsenal have been kept apart in the draw for the FA Cup semi-finals. The holders will play Newcastle, Arsenal will play Blackburn, and both those matches will take place at the Millennium Stadium on the 16th and 17th of April. The Newcastle match is more likely to be on the Sunday if they get past Olympiacos in the last 16 of the UEFA Cup. This is this Wednesday. The second leg of their quarter-final would be on the Thursday before these semi-final matches.
It's a good draw. Certainly Blackburn, who would be the outsider, have got Arsenal and been slightly unpredictable, so Blackburn will feel that they've got a chance in that. And Newcastle are on an excellent run, but I mean, it's if they do get to win the FA Cup this year, it's certainly been a hard route for Newcastle.
Ashley Cole has left a Premier League inquiry into allegations he held a secret meeting with Chelsea. These exclusive pictures show him leaving the hearing in central London for the day. The hearing relates to allegations that Chelsea made an approach, an illegal one, to the player who's under contract at Arsenal. Chelsea say Cole approached them, a claim denied by the player's agent Jonathan Barnett. The Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger has called Chelsea arrogant and naive for meeting with the defender at a central London hotel. Ian Robin has been included in Chelsea's squad for the match with West Brom. Robin has been out since the beginning of February after fracturing his foot. But West Brom manager Brian Robson is warning Jose Mourinho his side will be no pushovers.
I hope that some of the lads have just looked at some of the reports that's been in the weekend papers, about Chelsea not happy about just beating teams. They want to annihilate teams. And so when people are coming out with talk like that, you hope that your players sort of note it and just say, well, we're professional and we're going to give you a real tough game.
Robbie Savage is retiring from international football. The 30-year-old Welsh midfielder has played 39 times for his country and says he wants to focus totally on his club career with Blackburn. Wales manager John Toshak said that Savage only informed him of his decision once he'd been told he was not in the recent squad.
There's been a lot of speculation. I can't do anything about speculation in the press. I mean, what people write and what they think. I can only tell you what has happened, And I did get through to him this morning, and as I said, mentioned to him very briefly that he wouldn't be involved this time. And, he said, well, that's okay, I'm retiring from international football anyway. And the line went dead, and that was it.
Dundee United have sacked manager Ian McCall today. The side at bottom of the SPL with just 4 wins from their 29 matches this season. McCall's position was discussed by the board after Saturday's 3-0 defeat at Kilmarnock. David Beckham has launched his football academy in East London today. The England captain says it's always been his dream to coach youngsters and gives him the chance to put something back into football.
It's giving back something that, you know, I've been doing for a number of years, and you know, the whole setup is going to be that the soccer school will run, you know, through the summer, but the David Beckham Academy will be open, you know, all year round. There'll be 10,000 free places each year being given to kids and schools. There'll be 2,000 free places for schools around this area. And as I said, you know, I'm putting a lot of my own personal money into this, and because I believe that it's going to be a success. And you know, this first summer, the first opening of the soccer school, I'm personally paying for all the kids to come through and to spend time here. So you know, I'm lucky that I'm in a position where, you know, I can do that.
Well, the other England captain, Johnny Wilkinson, is having a scan down his latest knee injury. His comeback for Newcastle lasted just 34 minutes against Harlequins before he limped off with a ligament problem. It's the same knee that he damaged in January. Wilkinson is now a major doubt for the Lions tour this summer. That is all the sport for now.
Thanks very much, Jackie. You're watching Live at 5. Still to come this evening, does red tape keep police off your streets? We'll find out the truth about modern policing.
And the accusations that force one of Europe's top refs to blow the whistle on his career.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Olympics is the pinnacle of our sport.